Hey everybody, this is Jon Leon Guerrero, host of Your Break It Down show, and our guest today is Ezekiel Hampton. Zeke is a musician and local lifestyle guy who dabbles in all things leisure. He works in the wine industry and is just a great guy who knows great things to do in and around the Napa Valley. He joins us today because he's our friend, but also to promote his new album, which you will hear all about in just a sec. It's a strange time right now and a volatile time for our friends in the entertainment and hospitality industries, and Zeke is in both. I just want to encourage you all to patronize your favorite artists, including Zeke, but everybody else, especially your local artists, and your favorite restaurants and entertainment venues as we all make our way back to normal, whatever that new normal looks like on the other side. We're all in this together. We appreciate your support of the Break It Down show, too. So please, let your friends in on it. Pass that link around and reach back to us. I'm John at breakitdownshow.com. Pete is Pete at breakitdownshow.com. Couldn't be easier. And we both want to hear from you about music, about Zeke, whatever else you think is interesting. Lay it on us. Also, get yourself a t-shirt and a hoodie and show everyone how the players represent. You know, around here, we also like to support the folks at Save the Brave. They help veterans cope with PTS, and you can read about them and lend your support if you choose to at savethebrave.org. We hope you do it by sending them a little bit of money, and if you're in Southern California, maybe a little bit of your time too. Again, savethebrave.org for more info, or email us and we'll help put you in touch. One of the other businesses we don't know what's going to look like on the other end is Save the Brave, but we're all figuring it out together, and we all have the best intentions to help veterans in mind, so help out. It's really fun. It's really rewarding. You're going to meet a lot of great people. Finally, keep your eyes and ears out for Pete's new series coming out in July, The Prison Chronicles. He explores the criminal justice and correction systems in a way we haven't seen before and in a depth we haven't seen before. It's a tremendous piece of work that we think will move you and make you think about the way our correction system works. Back to the fun stuff. Here's our guest today, our friend Zeke Hampton.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is Jon Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Ezekiel James Hampton, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
And now, the Break It Down show with Jon Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
You are doing that, and we do have Ezekiel Hampton with us. Hey, man, returning guest, and always fascinating to talk with. It's nice to see your face, and how you been?
Likewise, good. Thanks, man. Keeping busy as I can, and
Clearly.
Are you rocking the longer hair, John?
Yeah, I'm letting my hair grow a little bit. I just, haven't done anything with it, but I am letting it go a little bit. Yeah, it's fun. I'm excited to hear that you have a new album.
Thank you. Yeah, man, it's one of the hardest accomplishments I would say I've had a chance to do. It took like 3 years, maybe a little more than 3 years to really get it completed.
Wow. And so let's talk about what it is and what the challenges were and what your vision for it was. And if it took you 3 years to do, did the vision change over the 3 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think initially, probably when it first started, Skylight Motion Picture was much more sort of a kind of it was a band. We each had our distinct personalities that were brought into it. And I think that's kind of comes more across in the EP. I think the last time we met, we just released the EP. But, with a lot of the challenges and changes happening to people, everybody's life, it resulted in stuff that like if we didn't finish it, if we didn't get it done, it never would have seen the light of day. And so the big challenge was, I think, was kind of getting different people on board, really, to the place where we are going to see this thing, and there were issues with, I think, with getting mixing, mastering, just some more production, the things that happen within post-production for captures and certain parts having to redo, certain parts, and that can weigh on people. And, sometimes the motivation to we need to get it done. So,
yeah, well, So is this a Skylight motion picture album, or is this an Ezekiel Hampton solo album?
No, it's a Skyline Motion Picture album. It's a collaborative album, but I guess in breaking it down, no pun intended. I did the music for all but one song. Was composed music all but for one song. Of course, the one song that I didn't do is probably my favorite song on the album. But that credit goes to my good friend Jordan, who did the drum work. He did a lot of the vocal work, production work as well. So that was sort of his song. The one song that he did is called Ebb and Flow on the album. That was kind of his baby. And it's probably, if not my favorite, definitely one of my favorites on the album. Okay.
Well, describe the album for our listeners. Who's going to love this album?
I think the idea was to sort of, like, back when we did the EP, it was very much about like paying homage to a lot of bands that we liked from the 80s, but maybe a little more kind of sugary sweet, a little more easily digestible. Whereas I think this one kind of went a bit more, it amplified a lot of the atmospherics, but it's also much more vocally, the focus on the vocals is a bit stronger. A lot of harmonies, a lot of call and response. So that's maybe one of the things that I'm most proud about it, is that you're going to hear multiple voices on almost every song, whether it's in the harmonies, whether it's in sort of like a little, kind of an atmospheric, just something that's in the background, but it's much more vocally collaborative.
Wow. Well, that's really challenging to do because it leans heavily on your performance, which means you have to rehearse the hell out of it. And then the technical part of capturing vocals, that's always a challenge. You always have a lot of artistic choices to make for everything. Miking, everything affects the sound. So it's a lot of work no matter what you're doing with an album, but plugging in your favorite amp where where your tone is that you can count on, that's a great place to start. Doing a vocal heavy album means that you have to tune everybody up, and there are just a ton of variables there. So is that what you set out to make 3 years ago, or did it evolve towards that?
It was what it was set out to that I was hoping to create, and ultimately, like we're all our own worst critics, and gonna, if you're someone who is a driven person, you're going to yourself to the absolute best of what you can do. And I do think the album is not perfect; it's got its flaws, but I do think it really is the best of what it could be. And it's certainly not something that I would be able to do if it was like my own thing. Like I heavily relied on other people to step in areas that I know I couldn't. But certainly, I was probably the person holding the fire poker and let's get this done. What do we got to do? And it's like a weird emotional stubbornness, I think, because there's certain things I'm pretty laid back about life but when it comes to, if you have like this sort of creative vision, I know that for me, no matter what the cost is, and even if that doesn't benefit me personally in the long run, it's like I have to see it done no matter what.
Okay. Who influenced this album? What were you listening to? And when you talk about your vocal arrangements and stuff, what influences are you drawing upon there?
Probably as far as vocally, I would say a lot of the shoegaze music from like the late 80s, early 90s, when it came to sort of using vocals almost as an instrument, where you might have, someone kind of upfront singing, but in a lot of that kind of music, the lyrics aren't more important than the music, and it's almost kind of on a more of an equal level playing field. So it's not necessarily about what exactly is every word, trying to understand what every word is saying, but more about like, how does this intuitively make you feel? And so I think a lot of having some of the swirly kind of high reverb vocals is more about adding to the musical experience. Don't get me wrong, the lyrics, I would say, especially compared to the EP, are, I would say, a little more decisive and maybe less obscure for the most part, but it's still, something whereas we want to appreciate the vocals as a part of the music as well.
We had Allie Willis on the show. She, may she rest in peace. We loved her. And the thing that she said that she learned from working with Maurice White was, don't let a lyric get in the way of a great melody. So I'm glad that you are having that same experience, but I also know that you're a writer and that you do have a message to communicate. So it's not just about throwing lyrics down to chase a melody around. So what are some of the subject matter that you delve into on this record?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. It's interesting because I would say, thematically speaking, if you go through some of the songs, I feel like there's an obvious connection where there's a connecting theme with the songs where there's like a sort of almost a sarcastic expression of some like sort of big abstract ideas like spirituality. Like I grew up in a pretty typical evangelical Christian household. And I'm not like someone who's gone so far removed, like I'm an angry, spiteful, anti-religion person in general. But I do really, really love being challenged, and I value questioning things and also pointing out hypocrisies and absurdities when they should pop up. And so, I think some of the songs they really kind of delve into this idea of questioning one's pursuit of trying to connect spiritually to things that are greater than ourselves as humans. And I think it simultaneously, while it questions those things, it sort of amplifies the stereotypes of the caricatures that exist within those cultures. It also affirms that I don't know everything, and I acknowledge that there are greater forces out there that I don't think it's a matter of human intellect. I just think the things that are out there that exist, and we're just not going to get all the answers that we want, and if you get enough answers with those big spiritual things to where you're pretty comfortable with what you think it is, that to me is like the biggest question mark. That's where I want to be like, if you want to be challenged and you really believe this, like you should be able to be able to engage and realize that like maybe that's not how it is.
So it sounds like an album with more questions than answers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I don't have answers, like, but I do think it's important in asking the questions. And while we may not get like definitive answers, I think you can still get emotional and spiritual answers. I think you can get answers that are good enough that bring contentment,
Where'd you make the album?
A combination of places. Lamar Ingle, he was the co-founder with me with Scarlet Motion Picture. He moved to the Los Angeles area, sort of kind of, I want to say like maybe when right around half the time when the songs were sort of being recorded. So some of it was done just through the interwebs and in bedroom studios. And then a good chunk of it also at my partner Jordan's house. He has a continuously more impressive studio set up in his living room. So,
well, I'll tell you, if Jordan's going to have an impressive studio setup, which is great, I encourage it. I think it's terrific. And you're going to make an album in it. He's got to name it.
Yeah. Well, he actually, he had a big influence in terms of how the album was presented, because I know there were certain songs that I felt like this should be the starter song. And he saw it as more like, no, this is the closer. We should start with this. Really challenged me to think about how we present the layout of the song. So he's very influential in that. And also, I just
meant that he needed to name the studio.
He might have his own. He might have his own name for it. We did have some live drums on a few of the songs, and we did record them in various places. One of them was Napa Valley Community College, actually. Yeah, where Jordan is he's a student there, so he was able to get access to one of their stage rooms and a lot of the drum mics. So that was impressive. Randomly, Father's House Church in Vacaville, we did some live drums recorded there.
Got a nice batch of gear at that place.
Yeah, it helps to know the engineer there. So
yeah, who's the engineer there?
Robert Sullivan.
Okay, they are doing some very interesting things with media, and it's all based on the fact that they have a great setup and a good band. When you are going through this process, and we have technology that allows us to trade files with somebody in Southern California, do you feel like that enabled you guys, or did you feel at all like it? I don't want to say handcuffed, but do you think it's a limiting behavior? Would you rather have had everybody together?
That's another great question. And I think I could relate to answering that differently. I think from one sense, the maybe more challenging factor is that it maybe feels less collaborative when you're not all together and you're not going through that process together. But then I'll also say, if you have a vision and your sole motivation is in make that vision seen all the way through. And I always prefer collaborative. I like being around people that are going to sort of make me better. In many instances, this album is really, it's an evolution. Because back when we first started, what it was, it did end up different in terms of its process, but the vision remained intact. So I think at the end of the day, it got done, and that was because of the vision.
Yeah. Well, when I think about the last 3 years of the Break It Down show and just how technology has shaped the way that we operate, and the fact that Pete can be in Orange County and I can be in the Bay Area, that's had its limitations to some degree. But then we get to do things like this. And suddenly the ability to do things like this empowers us in, these strange times that we live in. Would you say you had that same experience, Pete? Or what do you have to say about the
when it comes to
process?
Remote versus face-to-face, which is what we're ultimately talking about, the wine is sweeter when you're sitting across from that person. It's just better, when you're in that moment. And you get to be blown away more by, like, you're sitting at J.R. Robinson's house and you're just like, holy cow, I'm here. These are his drums. And all of those things, it seeps into the interview, and it's not that for the most part, we're not, starstruck, but you are in their dojo, you are in their house, and you just can't replace that. However, if Zeke is available to us in Napa via this way, it's still really, really great to be able to share these experiences like this. And then you still can have those moments when you're together, like on stage or whatever it is. So there's a lot of benefits to this where someone can just say yes, sit down on their computer, not even put pants on, and communicate with you in a way that makes sense.
I ain't wearing pants.
There you go.
There's a reason why you're only seeing white stuff.
That's right.
Yes, we're all rocking the Gary Radnich. When you say that, okay, there are times when you get a session player and you have a track and you have your arrangement nailed down. And then it's a matter of, hey, let me send you this file and you go nuts on the file. And sometimes that's awesome because it does lock in your vision. So since you've had this process take 3 years, I could see where that could create some advantage. Because it's like, okay, we're not going to sit here and pass it around, in the same room. We're going to do our parts. We're going to stick to the arrangement. We're going to, and when I pass this thing to you, it's half done. So you got to just take the ball and run with it. So I'm interested to hear, what you guys did in that regard. Did that influence anything else in the process in terms of, just like the artwork or the general vision or anything like that? Was distance a factor at all?
No, I wouldn't say that it was. I think the idea is that, no matter where we go from a instrumental standpoint, the idea is that we want to make music that is emotional for us. Like we want the process is almost as important, I would say, to the actual recording, in the sense of, like, we want to let those experiences kind of flow through in the music, and all the emotions and all the things that we think about, that we dream about. Like, I would say collectively, we're all people that have a strong sense of nostalgia, and we can sort of maybe have an analytical view on it in terms of, like, why something like nostalgia is sort of making us feel the way that we do and think the way that we do, and how it's impressed upon us. But at the same time, we don't want to dismiss the romanticism associated with it. So I think a lot of times for us, like the music, there's a lot of 80s influenced music that goes into it because we were born in the 80s, and just the first audio memory that we have. Kind of at that place, at that age where you're seeing how your senses work and how they can impact everything from how you feel about things to your worldview. And so, I think that's first. It's like very keyboard heavy. It's not the only instrument on there, but for me growing up in the 80s, keyboards were big, and that was the instrument for some reason that I was, able to. I was drawn to, and so a lot of times it's about kind of recreating similar memories of what you experienced growing up with those sounds.
That's pretty cool. Our guest on the show yesterday was Don Lewis. He's a synthesizer pioneer, and one of the things that he did was he created all the sounds in the DX7, which of course was used in everything in the 80s.
Yeah.
So he really just sort of created the sonic landscape that we are nostalgic about. I mean, all the, iconic records that had all the DX7 sounds, from When Doves Cry to Everybody Wants to Rule the World to Everything by New Order.
Everything.
And, that kind of contribution quietly happening in a, idyllic neighborhood in Pleasanton blows my mind, because you bring up nostalgia. And that was such a revolutionary time for the sound of just the sonic landscape of music that we all can get nostalgic about. Do you think nostalgia is more important to you as a tool for communicating emotion as you mature as an artist? Or is it something you're exploring now that you plan on going away from, just to shift gears for your next record?
Man, John, I love the questions that you ask, because it definitely makes me like go deep and really think about a thoughtful response. Yeah. But I will say that I think if I were to ever move away from that, it probably would betray who I am in terms of as someone who wants to create. Like I have like limited ways of expressing myself, but I want to amplify it to the max. And so by being able to create songs, and being able to, I would say the one thing, being able to translate the sounds and the music that I have in my head, and being to actualize that. The nostalgia is a huge part of it. It's not, I'm not trying to put it on an altar and worship it. But if I were to ever move away from I'm throwing the baby out with the bathwater,
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, then it's great that you recognize it as a tool in your quiver, because there's something to the simplicity. I think every artist that we've had on the show, as you get further down your career, there's that peak of ability, chops or whatever, where you sort of are just gathering more and more that you can use. And then there's where you turn the corner, it seems. And Pete, let me know if you hear anything. Oh, I think Pete just disappeared. Anyway,
Yeah.
No, let me know if you have a different observation of this. But it seems like all of the artists who've been around for a while have that moment where they go, I got to pare it back. I got to simplify. And if you look at the longevity of guys like, Springsteen or James Taylor or anything like that, it's like you have those times in your career where you have a bigger band and you have more resources at your disposal. And at some point, everybody dials it back and goes, nah, I got to get back to, the old saying, 3 chords and the truth.
I think that's really interesting. And I imagine people that are so obsessed with creating that there's this idea that that you always want to feel like you're evolving and that you're adaptable. Because even while it took this long to create this sort of collaborative album, I created 2 solo ambient records in within the same time frame, and as soon as this Skylight album comes out, I'm already working on another full length, and I'm doing like my first like hip hop album. So it's this idea of like you are obsessed with the need to create, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in one particular format. It can be packaged differently, and that's where I think adaptability comes into play, and also the desire to evolve. And like, I don't want to necessarily just keep doing the same thing that I've been doing. I've explored this. There are new, exciting other areas to really explore and to, somehow get some kind of personal interpretation of it.
Let's talk about this hip hop record you're working on.
One that I'm really just kind of focused on doing the music and making the beats and working with different rappers around the country, actually. But I'm taking if there's any sort of time thread to the album, it's taking a lot of sounds and sampling from music from my younger years, and it's sort of paying homage to it. And that's what I love about hip hop, is that that is truly the outlet where you can pay homage to different kinds of music. Like as a kid, I knew I was kind of weird because I loved like new age music and I loved world music, but it's like with hip hop, you can weave those other genres. You can weave whatever you liked. Didn't how bizarre. You can weave it into the hip hop outlet. And so this album, I'm taking a lot of samples and sounds that made a strong impression on me as a kid, trying to pay homage to that. And then, working with different rappers around the country. Still in early stages, but, excited about it.
Okay, so what are some of those influences that you're exploring?
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
So what are some of those influences that you're exploring?
Well, I also love irony a lot. And so I'm taking, I have normally, I guess how I would approach creating a hip hop beat is I'll think of a sample or something that in mind where I'm like, this would be great to sample. I could see this in a hip hop song. I'll sample it, put it to a beat, and then I'll sort of compose around it and, create the music around it. But like currently, I know what's going to end up being on this album eventually is I got music from the original Hulk Hogan theme song before Real American, which is a classic. But the original Hulk Hogan theme song from like the mid 80s also became the theme song to like an animated wrestling series. And eventually the composer sold off the rights to Bonnie Raitt, I believe. And Bonnie Raitt made a song called Ravishing. You remember that song, Ravishing? Well, anyways, she... So that song was used. I got some where I took some like Christian apocalyptic videos from the 70s, and I took the theme music from that, and I composed around that. What else we got? We got some music from Papa Vu, one of my longtime favorite bands. We have music from Tetris, video games, and from some other sort of kind of children's anime videos from the 80s. So it's kind of fun to chop them up and give them a new sort of expression. Maybe I'll just mention that with Skyline Motion Picture, the band that I get to write music under SkylineMotionPicture.com. Hear the new album on iTunes, Pandora, Spotify, pretty much any new music outlet. I do my ambient music under Radagast the Brown. So those are the two outlets that have kept me the most busy.
Hey, I gotta say, man, you are Johnny on the spot because you found yourself in the room alone and you carried it. Grabbed the glass of wine and started to ad lib. So I appreciate that.
Well, I just don't want any. I can imagine nobody wants dead air. So it's like you got a big red thing.
I have wine now,
saying that it's live.
Yep.
Oh, nice. What are you drinking?
Box O.
Box O.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, the apostrophe after the O?
Yeah. Shelf stable wine.
You on the apostrophe this time.
No, I didn't spend money on that. This box and an O.
Yeah. So,
all right. The working man's wine.
That's right.
The thing is, you are in the wine business, or at least you are in Napa, which pretty much everybody who's in Napa is somehow touched by the wine business. And you've really taken to it, huh?
Yeah, no, you're right. The last time we spoke, I was almost in a completely opposite situation where I'm in now, where I was kind of working more for a startup, and it was kind of off the cuff. Things can change every day. And now, I'm in the corporate wine world. I work for the largest wine company in the world, and it's weird because it's been a really good learning experience for me because it's a different kind of role. It's an office job, and I've never really kind of been it's a new territory for me, but I'm enjoying the refinement that it is offering me.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah, it's making me do things I'm doing things with HTML, different software systems. None of that stuff was really in my wheelhouse of regular everyday verbiage, but I don't necessarily just want an easy. I don't want easy. I like to be I like to broaden my range of what I'm able to offer, you know?
Okay, that sounds good. How has comfort affected your ability to communicate or your artistic endeavors?
You know, it's interesting because I'm someone who appreciates the challenge of not being comfortable, you know, but I also know that me intuitively as a person, just that's all I want is to be comfortable. You know, I want to be comfortable emotionally and physically, spiritually. I want all those things. And it's because they're easy. I mean, who wouldn't want those things to be easy? You know, but I do like the idea of growth and progressing and moving forward. And, you know, I think that's what makes getting through sometimes the real shitty parts of life, like that's what makes it worth going on, is because you get to grow as a human, not even just like someone who's maybe artistic, but like you get to grow as a human being, and maybe you get to love differently. And there are just so many ways where you can demonstratively, you know, sort of earn your stripes in that sense.
Are you sheltering in place, working from home?
Yeah, I am very fortunate that I still have a job and I'm working from home, and that I have a job where I can do that. But it's, you know, it's been different, and, you know, but I'm working through it, but I'm getting a little antsy. I kind of would like to, you know, but that's because also I want to go back to what I'm comfortable with. I'm comfortable with my routine and going to my office where, you know, the pacing is a little bit different because I have like 3 computer screens and I can move about a bit more quickly, where here, like, I'm on a laptop and sometimes
a lot less real estate.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask you about the musical marketplace, because you've got this professional endeavor in the wine industry that's growing and challenging you in ways that, you know, a professional wants to be challenged, but you also have this artistic branch of what you have to do to, I mean, look, it's not easy. You may not know this. It's not easy to put an album together, you know, a lot of hours, a lot of fucking work.
Yeah.
And unlike so many industries, local honey, farm to market, all these industries, people don't give 2 shits about an album that comes out from a local artist. They cannot be bothered. They'd rather listen to, and I love Jimmy Buffett, but they'd rather listen to Jimmy Buffett for the 500 fucking thousandth time than to spend $5 on your album. Talk about that part of the pursuit.
Well, the marketplace is interesting because nowadays you're not really, as an independent artist, and I would say even as a mainstream artist, you're not necessarily banking on just people buying your album. A lot of times now it comes down to streams and sort of online marketing. So, you know, if you're on Spotify or iTunes, YouTube, you know, you're almost like now shifting gears to how many plays can I get, sort of how much online attention. And even though you might be getting like 1/10 of a penny for each play, that is sort of maybe the way that you feel like, in terms of what kind of maybe what kind of impact you're having or how many people are listening, is like, if you can expand your reach online, that's almost, it seems to me, like substitute the place of what you would get if you were to be playing live. And, you know, if you sold, you know, 30 albums for just like playing a local show, you still get the gratification of, I guess, maybe the attention and people enjoying it, but it just comes in different ways. And unfortunately, it's in a less monetized way.
How about live shows? Because a lot of bands nowadays are, you know, because it's a less monetized environment for your recordings, they're depending more on live shows and people gathering. And I know we can't gather right now, but at some point we're going to get back to listening to live music. I know we're going to be resilient for that. Do you guys have any intention of playing live and supporting the album with live shows? You know, there was a plan to kind of have have a big release and sort of kind of do like a one-time show. You know, but unfortunately, it was not, you know, everybody kind of sort of had different things going on. So for me, by the time we kind of got in the last wheel of getting the album done, it was just about, because there's been so much investment and time put into it, we just got to get it done. And we're not going to get a return on it. Like, there's just no way. So what I'm hoping to do now is sort of kind of as a retreat and trying to have maybe a slightly less stressful process, is like, I'm working on doing another full-length album that, you know, hopefully could even be done
by this year, but that's because the approach is differently. And this is much more where it's going to go in a different direction. And I'm just going to be paying people, other professional artists to contribute, whether it's a vocal part or a guitar part, a drum part, because to me, even though that can get really expensive, when you think about the amount of time that gets invested, if you're determined to see it get done, it's going to be less cost to pay a lot of money to do that.
Wow. So one of the things that we do for artists when they emerge and they become popular is we make them comfortable, at least in the old model. You'd get a record deal, the record would do well, and then they'd pour a bunch of money on you. And at that point, that's why so many sophomore albums fail, because now the struggle's gone. As you describe it, the routine is gone. The hunger and desire, maybe have been affected, or maybe they work you to death on the road and you get tired. Any one of those things. But it looks like you are experiencing change that makes you want to do something less collaborative and more individual and focused. Is that right?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I would much rather do something collaborative. Like I would love, the thing is, I know my bottom line, Skylight Motion Picture will always keep going. And whether it's going to be different phases, whether that's just me and like kind of contracting out parts, or if it's going to be, I would prefer it to be collaborative. But the thing is that requires also a lot of commitment. And, especially if you are wanting to take the craft seriously and there's a lot of people that they want to play for fun, and the sort of enjoyment they get just from doing it is enough satisfaction. And I know for me, despite it like being a very real passion and coming from a real genuine place to want to create, that's not satisfactory enough for me. It's maybe my own ways of dealing with my own personal struggles and issues, but I feel like I need to get to a place where, I do feel maybe progressively more validated, or a wider audience actually enjoys the music, and not like I know.
Don't apologize for that, man.
Yeah.
Do not apologize.
It's just being like, well, it's one of those things where it's like not the most flattering thing to admit, but like I am someone who wants to feel like everything that I'm feeling and the desire to create this has some kind of purpose and meaning, and whether any kind of audience response isn't the end all be all of that. But I know from the emotional side of me, like, man, I do want that, because I know people that are going out there and doing it, and they're having success with it. And, I don't need to be like a number one artist. For me, I want to spend more of the limited time that we have in life. I want to spend more time creating and growing, because the more time, or the less time that I get to sort of cultivate that, it's almost feeling like musical blue balls in a sense. Like you just, the less you actually get to, you got all that energy. You're just not getting it out there so much, And I think for artists too, who maybe get to the place where it gets stagnant. I don't mean this in a overgeneralized way, but there's some people too out there. For me, I don't understand the word boredom. Like I will find a way to adapt. There are always things to learn, to read about, to do. There's just not enough time in the day to do all the things that I want to do. So for me, for approaching it musically, I don't want to make the same album. I don't want to make 10 punk albums that are the same album in a row. I want to be able to put out something that means a lot in that time, put it out, and then move on and do something different. And there's just so much to be inspired by. It
sounds a lot like something Rick Rubin would say. He's a guy who's never bored. He loves tranquility sometimes. He loves action sometimes. And he doesn't look back a whole lot. And it's interesting to me that I know you have a degree of humility that makes it so that it doesn't sound flattering to say that you are looking for some sort of, validation in the art. But it is easy to, if you flip to, let's say, comedy, a guy who's working on the craft of comedy, he needs to hear people laugh. And when you're hearing, and it doesn't need to be an arena full of people, but you just need some validation that the craft that you're creating is getting is getting the emotional response that you intended it to get.
Yeah, and that's because I think it all comes down to like personal connection, because you feel these things and you want to be able to, that's why we crave connection. I think it's because we want to know that we're not alone and that other people are feeling these things. And, I think it's the same for you. Comedy is a great example, but like any sort of expressive outlet, you automatically feel these things because you're the one trying to do your own version of expressing that. And the way you feel connected, which you don't have to be a creator of any sort to desire that. But like you want to know that people kind of understand you and kind of get where you're coming from with all that.
Would it be enough if you left a legacy that maybe got found 100 years from now and some portion of humanity dug it up and went, wow, how come we don't know about this? And, is that enough for you as an artist when you create, thinking that, well, maybe nobody will get it now, and at some point somebody will?
John, one of my favorite conversational topics to talk about is legacy. Because I think there are so many, even if that's not an intentional, you don't think of it in such a intentional term, I think that you can find a way to weave that into, how do we live our life? And when we talk about the kind of values that we have, why do we have these values? And, if you dig deeper, I think a lot of it comes down to what is the legacy you want to leave? To me, it would feel kind of cheap and self-indulgent if I were to say 100 years from now, I want my name to still be out there. I want whatever, some kind of creation to be out there. When the reality is, once I'm dead, I don't care. Like I'm not going to be really around to care about it. But
that's healthy.
I think though, you want like the people, that you do care about in your life that are in the present. I think you want to feel like you are someone who has been impactful and special. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be through, the creative arts or anything expressive. I think it could be even just in terms of how you approach relationships in general. And are you someone, if you pass on, will you be remembered as someone who was really good at loving other people? That feels more important than, this thing that I was feeling, that this musical, this whole thing, and like, will this be around in 100 years,
So then when you look at legacies, there's legacies out there, being realistic, who would you want to be close to? Like, man, if I could reach in a legacy like this, there's someone I admire with what they did.
Well, so this might be, because I feel like there could be some obvious answers. Like I can talk about, there's certainly people in my life that have really strongly impacted. Like my dad is someone who, from an early age challenged me to think about those things, growing up and sort of live intentionally in that sense. But I will tell you, just because it might be sort of more of a curveball, I want to say a couple years ago, I read the biography of Charlton Heston. And certainly not a perfect person and not a person without controversy, but someone who, when you see the people around that are around him in his life, the way they view him is with such cherishment. And, I think someone who maybe kind of could be a bumbly at times, but also was able to really live out things that he felt convicted in his life, whether it was, marching with Martin Luther King and the civil rights, or, whether it was, expressing a certain cinematic character in a movie that he was in, because he just felt convicted about it. So I think that is someone who, to me, at least for me, is a larger than life person. It's a very human and realistic, but also someone who, to me, seemed like lived a very rich life that was grounded in love.
What about you, John?
Man, I'm really so blown away that I wouldn't have thought I would have gone like 100 musicians before ever getting to Charlton Heston. And now that you've said that spurs all kinds of different thoughts about who it ought to be when you think about legacy, because there are considerations like that really deserve to be made. I mean, if you think about guys like, I don't know, any of the movie stars. I mean, I think about Paul Newman because he did so many really interesting things and touched people in a lot of interesting ways. But I have an Uncle Julian, and he's the guy that I thought of when you brought up just the person who just seemed to love everybody exactly the right way. My Uncle Jesse is a guy who, no matter where you encounter him, you talk to him for 5 minutes, and when you leave, you will think, and you won't be wrong, but you will think that his entire reason for living that day surrounded you. And it doesn't matter whether you go to a party and there are 100 people there. And he's just the kind of guy that he'll talk to you for 5 minutes and be so engaging and so curious and so focused on you that when you walk away from him, you think, man, there were 100 people at that party, and that guy paid attention to me, unlike he paid attention to anybody else.
There's a really unique, it is a really unique gift. My girlfriend calls it the shine, as in like the shining. We get the shine because there are certain people, I think, that we know that are so talented in being able to connect. And as you said, like make you feel like you're the only person in the room and just have really strong relational abilities in that connection part. And it's interesting because these people can a lot of times maybe be tortured individuals or, people that you would never would know are actually like really big introverts, but they're so expressive and they're so good with their intuition, their intuition with when they're in a room with other people that they have that magnetic ability. I know Tom Cruise is someone I know that has that ability. And I know, people.
Everybody says that about him. Everybody says that about him.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Scientologist or whatever label you want to put on him. But boy, the guy gets the job done, and there is not a person who has an encounter with him who doesn't say exactly that.
Yeah, no, that's
that
true.
Guy was 100% into what we were doing right at that moment. Pete, you don't get to pass that question around and then not answer it.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, because life continues to ebb and flow, but I would say, something. Give me 80% of what Charles Kuralt did and how much he mattered to people without picking a side and just coloring who we are. I'd love that. That I mean, I don't aspire to it, but if I'm going to pick a spot up there on the mountain, the Charles Kuralt suite would do me just fine.
Yeah, he definitely falls into that category too. You're right. He talked to 1 million people and they all will tell you, exactly that about him. Like, boy, when I did Charles Kuralt's show, he's the guy who asked the real questions. He's the guy who really got into it. So that's interesting, man. I appreciate both of you sharing a vision for what legacy is really all about, because those are, I'd say, the best answers of that question. And the most maybe left field answers of that question.
I was trying to shake it up because I feel like there could be some obvious answers, and I think it's kind of more fun to shake it up a little bit,
Yeah, the easy thing would be to go to a musical legacy, like, Prince.
Yeah,
Prince. He left behind all kinds of stuff, or you could just go right down the line, Springsteen, David Bowie, whoever. But to stop at never mind commerce and just think about what really matters. And what really matters is you left a trail of people who you put some love on. What was that like for everybody? And that really is, man, that's one of the most profound things that we've heard in 700 shows.
Well, it's the relationship. Man, that's the most important thing, and I personally don't ever want to get to a place where I lose sight of of that being the most important thing, because I really, for me, at least from a faith standpoint, like that is to me like that's what gives me purpose. As much as I would love to say that creating and making music and all these other expressions are the reason why I exist. I mean, I would love to feel that convicted, but I don't think that they outweigh the everyday, the people that are, in our lives every day, and what we're doing to sort of invest and foster those relationships. Because that, I imagine that's just going to have more impact. That's going to have more meaningful impact than, you make an album that a lot of people like. But, if you're truly kind of a dirtbag, and you don't have the things, the relationship closest around you intact, then it feels kind of cheap.
Well, I'm going to turn things around on you, though, and say that I think that your hit record will come when you've figured out the way to put that love on somebody with your instrument in your hand. And maybe that's the key.
We'll see. Well, I know that I will never stop. I will always, and it doesn't matter if 3 people listen to it or 3 million. Like that's I guess ultimately, as much as I would like to say I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder and I create and play maybe with a bit of an angry passion, I ultimately know that love wins, but also that it's not going to stop. I'm still going to be doing the things that intuitively you feel you have to do just to get it out. It's like having to eat. You feel hungry, you have to eat to satisfy that hunger pain. And it's the same thing with creating.
Love wins. Thanks, man. This has been great. Everybody, Ezekiel Hampton, the new album out from Skylight Motion Picture. Take a listen to it. Where can people hear it?
Wherever they listen to their other music. So whether it's Spotify, Pandora, iTunes, Amazon, Bandcamp, it's on all those.
Terrific. All the music platforms.
Yeah. And hey, if you guys ever come to Napa and you just want to do like a little 3 amigos, maybe we do a little wine tasting, maybe make a little dinner for you.
You don't gotta sell anymore. It's already done.
Yeah. And I'm in Benicia, so I'm not going to wait for next time Pete comes up. I'm going to wait for I'm going to wait for this thing to loosen up, and I absolutely will hit you up.
Please, because I too take a great pleasure and delight in being able to host and share fun, tasty things. So we'll be drinking very well. I'll promise you that.
I like to drink well.
Well, you're a fascinating guy, and I certainly haven't gotten enough of you, and I'll take you up on it. Awesome. Ezekiel Hampton, everybody.